Hello and welcome to Creating and Managing Users. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the different ways that you can create and manage users in Azure Active Directory. Now, every user who will be accessing Azure resources will need an Azure AD account that includes all the information that Azure needs to authenticate that user during sign-on. Once the user is authenticated, Azure AD will determine what resources that user can access and what that user can do with those resources. Generally speaking, Azure Active Directory will define users in three separate ways. Users can be defined as cloud identities, directory synchronized identities, and guest users. Users that are considered to be cloud identities will show Azure Active Directory or external Azure Active Directory as their source in the Azure AD portal. These types of accounts are considered to be cloud identities because these users exist only in Azure AD. A user that is a member of your Azure AD will show a source of Azure Active Directory, while a user that's defined in another Azure AD instance but needs access to resources in your Azure subscription will show a source of external Azure Active Directory. Users that show a source of Windows Server AD in the Azure AD portal are called directory synchronized identities. Directory synchronized identities are those users that have been synchronized to Azure AD from an on-prem Active Directory via Azure AD Connect. And then, of course, guest users are users that exist outside of Microsoft Azure. A typical guest user might be an account from another cloud provider, or maybe a user with a Microsoft account like an Xbox Live account. These guest users will show up in your Azure AD users list as invited users. Guest user accounts are often used to grant external vendors or partners access to Azure resources without the need to create a separate internal account for them. Now, there are several ways to add users in Azure Active Directory. You can sync users from an on-prem Active Directory to Azure AD. You can use the Azure portal to manually add those users, or you can even use the command line. If you prefer to use the command line to create new users, you can use either PowerShell or the Azure CLI. I should also point out that you can also create users in bulk from a CSV file when using Azure PowerShell. Other ways to create Azure AD users include using the Azure AD Graph API, the Office 365 Admin Center, or even the Microsoft Intune Admin Console. In the upcoming hands-on lab, what you'll get to do is create a user and group in Azure AD using the Azure AD portal.